This episode is brought to you by Merrill. Join one of the most iconic names in wealth management, Merrill. You'll be part of a dynamic team of advisors and specialists working hard every day to grow their clients' wealth. And with the support of best-in-class research, advanced digital tools, and the resources of a global institution, it's truly an opportunity you can be bullish about. Learn more at careers.bankofamerica.com. Copyright 2024, Bank of America Corporation.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as I talk about 4 types of freedom: time, financial, location, and health freedom. And so today we have a really interesting guest. She's an intuitive. She has a lot of different gifts and abilities to read energies and help people on their spiritual paths. Let me introduce her. Her name is Ayasha. And so she's going to talk. Well, she is a certified emotional and energetics facilitator. She works with corporate clients as well as private clients with their journeys. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation, and I'll let Aasha get into it. So Aasha, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Do you like to be called Dr. Christopher or just Dr. C, or anything that you prefer? What do you prefer to be called?
Chris is fine.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. Very grateful to be here and grateful to anyone who's listening. It's excited to touch base and get to know you a bit more. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you have a really interesting story to tell people about it. It's actually quite interesting.
Yes, I have. It's a little out there. I'm happy to share it and indulge. And I think actually the really cool thing is in my work and the way I speak, I do try to be as relatable as possible. I think a lot more people go through something like I went through than maybe they speak about at this stage of life and where we are in the collective consciousness. But about 20 years ago, I had a breakup with a boyfriend. And in that time, he ended up holding on to my soul. And then about 2 years ago in 2020, I could feel him releasing, really starting to let go. And when that happened, when he let go, I reached out to him. And then it got like hot 2 magnets. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that feeling of meeting a very magnetic connection. And then within 6 weeks, he essentially, for lack of a better word, ghosted me. And when that happened, I was able to see everything all at once. I lost I got in a divorce. I lost my job. I got in a car accident. And I was being exposed to every core wound under the sun. So it was the father wound, the mother wound, the rejection wound, abandonment wound, attachment wound. And I was able to see the dynamic of energy and motion. So emotions, energetics. And I was gifted with a lot of different energetic gifts. And so instead of, I'm a really very typical type personality of my own, which is really digging in and figuring out what's going on and really into knowledge and learning as much as I can. And I knew this was some sort of calling. So instead of staying in maybe the victim for too long and feeling my emotions, my uncomfortable emotions at the time, I just started to try to get as much education as I could. And I was able to go back to school to become a shamanic practitioner and a quantum light body activations healer, a hypnotherapist, and then further develop my emotional intelligence and the understanding of trauma. Went back to school for trauma and attachment theory. So it's been an amazing, crazy adventure. There's a lot more to uncover with that's just like this sort of short version. But it's been amazing and fantastic. And I've been able to help a lot of people with the modalities and methods that came through this experience.
Interesting. It's a quite interesting story. Everything manifests itself from childhood emotional trauma. And you described something very interesting. When you say you could feel somebody holding on to you, or a lot of listeners, they won't be able to relate to that, or and then when you say that when he released, all of a sudden, all the wounds manifested themselves. What do you think caused that? It's quite fascinating.
It is. I'm so glad you asked such an intricately detailed question, because it does seem unrealistic. And with energy, we can't see it. So we have a hard time understanding it And most people put it into the woo-woo or esoteric category, when really attachment is the root of all suffering. We hold on to stories which manifest into limiting beliefs, conditioned things to which the way we were brought up, by no fault of our parents necessarily, but certainly the way in which our soul chooses to grow. And so what happens potentially in a heartbreak? So when he and I broke up about 20 years ago, he fell into what we call a dark night of the soul. So I left the house and he went and felt like his heart was being ripped out of his chest. So what typically happens is people can end up really sad or really hurt for a very long time. A lot of men actually, because men don't have a lot of sister circles or friends to talk about their emotions with, they end up homeless or addicted to drugs or maybe a drinking habit just to get rid of the pain. We reach outside of ourselves. So he did that over 20 years. He was still holding on and attached to this version of me. And so when he let go, he didn't let go because he healed himself. He let go because he had met another woman. And so ended up latching onto her. And when I felt it, and then I was able to see this push and pull dynamic of the narcissistic codependent relationship very clearly. It was I was the sort of narcissistic one, then he was the codependent, and then my ex-husband was both. And it was really very prevalent of what happens when we trauma bond with each other. And we can do this with our money. So we can have this feeling of wanting more money, and that anxious energy is actually creating the opposite effect, which is avoidance. So the money will actually stay away because money's an energy. So it's a really cool way to actually figure out how to come back into your body and balance your masculine and feminine within. So whatever he was looking for in me, he really could have found through his own heart space and through his healing, typically his mother wound. Yeah.
Interesting. Which sounds a lot. This is, obviously the work that you've done with clients, and it's really interesting to break apart and dissect things. So it's almost like when you're someone who's really dependent on the outcome or reactive or quote, what people describe as needy or victim, and instead repels whatever they're seeking. And then, all of a sudden, if you just let go and you just forget about what people are, and then all of a sudden it starts to manifest. So it's very counterintuitive, but I think that's what you're describing in a general sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about, exactly. So it's about detaching from the outcome. Now, easier said than done. When we have all these stories and certain ways that we were growing up, then it makes it really difficult, especially for women. Women are boundless love. We've got a lot of energy, a lot of emotions. We run off of the right hemisphere of our brain primarily. And it can get really anxious. It's almost like when you get excited to meet someone and you meet someone, and next thing you know, in your mind, you've been married with 4 kids, but you've never even really had a date with them. And so we can do this when we get excited. And these are all things that are taking us outside of our body, out of the present moment. So the whole goal of life is to move up to higher states of consciousness, higher states of ascension. And as we do that, we begin to rely on our own power within. And that makes us magnetic for money and love.
Interesting. So when you say, I hear people say, raise your vibe, raise your collective consciousness, what is actually going on? What is the process? What are you thinking, feeling? How do you raise your internal frequency?
Oh, great question. So I actually have a frequency test that I use. It measures 26 competencies of emotional intelligence. So I'm working right now with an executive team. There's 12 of them. It's in the service industry. So they work for a hotel company. Now, the main big boss keeps suggesting to everybody to find something that they love outside of work. Find something they love outside of work should be number 5. But everybody who works there, their highest and most biggest strength is service orientation. There are generations of people who have worked in hotel. So when he's telling them to find something else to love, they can't resonate. Now, this information we wouldn't be able to see unless we give this psychometrics test. and it shows where everybody's vibrating. And then we're able to grow the growth areas. It's almost the thing I love about this test is it's really measurable. And I'm really analytical. I don't like just like, something's wrong with me. What is it? Like mindset development. It's more about awareness of what specifically not working so we can create the biggest amount of change in the shortest amount of time. So what I do in my work is not only do we pinpoint the area, but I go into the energetic field in the subconscious mind if the client is open for it. And we get right to the root of the problem much faster because our subconscious is about 90% of where we make our decisions.
Yeah.
It's dark in there. So you definitely want to go in and find out what it is. Yeah. You can talk about it and go to therapy and coach on it for years. Whereas this work is 8 weeks to 12 weeks and you're good to go. Not good to go, but you're growing. Yeah. So yeah, it's good.
Interesting.
So when you raise your frequency, you're going to start attracting more things in your life that are going to resonate with how you view yourself. So the people that we bring into our life are a reflection of what we believe about the stories that are within ourselves. So you may see people resonate away, which I'm sure you've experienced. I'm sure your listeners have experienced. And there's fear there. Sometimes you may want to hold on to that version. That's why people stop themselves or stifle their growth or not do their dream. Mm-hmm. And because it's scary in the unknown. But the unknown is almost always the place where the beauty dwells after you dig in the dirt and you find the diamonds. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. You're like moving up to higher states of consciousness on the ladder of ascension.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's really fascinating. And if you read people like Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra, some of their concepts, you can read it and make sense, but then there's other concepts, if you're not ready for it, you just don't understand it until you get to that place where you're ready. And then all of a sudden you read it again and that makes sense and that makes sense. But what you're describing this spiritual embodiment, this pathway for growth and development, in today's world.
Yeah. And I love what you just shared because you're describing resonance. You're describing like what resonates. And really, the average human, it takes about 10 times of listening to a message to really start to consume it. When you don't have a lot of stories, when you've cleared a lot of your trauma, when you've moved in and you have a heightened awareness of who you are, you're actually going to receive the messages faster. And now this, for me, I'm very scientific based. Like, what's the real facts here? It's law. It's the law of compounding. It's the law of momentum. Mm-hmm. It's the law of attraction. So when you compound and you build momentum, you can do that with the little tiny things that you choose not to do every day, like save money or spend money every single day or eat bags of chips in front of Netflix. Those little behaviors compound and build momentum. And this is why we see a lot of marriages breaking down because people aren't prioritizing growth first in their own inner being, in their own inner journey, and respecting the other person in their level of truth and growth as well. When there's relationships and stuff where people are just choosing not to grow at all, and society may say it's bad to leave that relationship, where in my belief system, I believe growth has to come first and that you need to do what your soul says to do. I think that there's a beauty in that. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what are the decisions you're making that are small, that are building momentum. And then if you're simultaneously clearing your stories with energy work at the same time, you're going to get to the bullseye much faster. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. And when you say energy work, what is energy work? Like, just, you don't have to know you teach it, but overview, when people say I'm doing energy work, what does that entail?
Love that question. So I have a method. So I actually have really simple. Everything boils down to masculine and feminine energy. We have both inside of our body. Mm-hmm. Receiving is feminine. Taking action is masculine. Love is feminine. And truth is masculine, right? Mm-hmm. So when we come into alignment, we're building our love, self-love, and our honoring ourselves. A good example is I like to get dressed up and go on Facebook and be like a bit on a stage. I used to have a lot of guilt around that maybe, when that I was maybe a bit of a show pony. And now I just think it's adorable and fun. And it's something that makes me feel happy. So that's love for myself. And then truth is me being able to say that to you in this moment and not feeling any shame, right? Just owning it and being okay with it. So we build this love and this truth. So in my process, I do a combination of illumination, which is a way that I help people. I go deep into their energy field remotely or in person, and I help them clear the stories. And the shamanic practice is a very feminine practice. And then the other practice I use is called quantum light body. And it's more interdimensional. It's really cool, really beautiful, fun way of healing. You feel amazing and all these great, cool things start happening. People get huge sums of money. Ex-boyfriends will come back. Ex-partners will leave. All this really cool stuff starts to shift. And so those are the methods I use. And then I wrap everything up in emotional intelligence and the 26 competencies. That's also energy work. And so I do that. And mostly by the men that I work with, they feel more powerful, more purpose driven, and they usually lose weight and get more money. And then same with the women, they lose weight, they get more money, and they feel more feminine and relaxed. So yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation. I'm always interested in the spiritual and just trying to understand it. And even if it doesn't make sense, how to apply it to making yourself a better person and being of service in today's world.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people may have extra questions or visit you. I know you have YouTube and you're on Twitter and LinkedIn. So how can they connect with you, contact you, visit your website?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, I just wanted to say, especially for the doctors who are listening, I've been in that place where when you're a high achiever, you have so much pressure that other things may begin to fall to the wayside, whether it's relationships or your health or your money, your relationship with money. All of that stuff is just energy that's uneven and not distributed. Yeah, like consistently in our life, we tend to give a lot of energy toward one thing and maybe other areas start to fall back. So I just wanted to share that I understand that and empathize with anybody who can relate to that. And that energy work really does help balance you. Trust me, I know because I'm a living example. So I'm a CEO of a business with 4 employees and I'm a single mother. So the pressure can feel a lot, and energy work really helps you to get through that. Life can be really difficult. So if you're interested in hearing more or following me, the best place is probably on Facebook is my strongest and most easy place to connect with me. It's Aasha, AASHT as in Thomas. And then also I'm Asha_T_healing, like healing your wound on Instagram, both those places. And then if you're into the corporate side and learning more about how to use this to build teams, which is so much fun, we check the woo. It's more about how can we actually get the most performance out of your team members while they're also feeling really good. And that is Ashva T. LaCount, LACOUNT on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And for all of the audience, people listening out there, Asha's resources will be in the links and show notes, and be sure to check them out. Follow her on her social media. And thanks so much. It's been an enlightening conversation. It's really we're all beings on a spiritual path, but it's great that 2020 illuminated that.
Oh, love that. I love that. I'd love to hear about your experience really quickly, but with energy work, have you had any done before?
That's what I'm saying. Nothing formal not with coaching but a couple of my friends, they've had energy work done, and you can see them like progress, and they address old emotional wounds. I've done things such as Reiki or had a shamanic house cleaning, those types of things, which is really interesting. But there's so many different facets,
that's my goal this lifetime, is to just bring it to the mainstream. I don't feel like I know that it needs to be incorporated into therapy as like a non-negotiable, because there's just a lot of pain happening in the moment. And I think we're going to see a lot more as the children who experienced 2020 grow up. So I'm just going to stay on my path and keep trying to bring it down to earth as much as possible, so people aren't afraid of it and they're embracing the non-woo-ness of energy and emotions. Wow. They're not bad. They're just energy. So good.
Excellent. Thanks, Al. And we will look forward to hearing about your future success.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was awesome. I enjoyed myself. Thank you.